have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, welcome to the final episode of TV Guidance Counselor of 2020, a year that nobody will be upset to see the back of, I am sure. This week I have no guest. It's just me. I'm doing the same thing I did last year because anything I did this time last year that set us on the course for our year to follow, clearly I should do again since it was such good luck to do it last year. But, I'm doing it anyway. I'm not going to curse us and say 2021 can't possibly be worse than 2020, but I'd be really surprised if it had been. So if you weren't with us last year, or if you're a new listener, welcome. People enjoyed this, so I asked, and I thought it was a little self-indulgent, but people seem to enjoy it, and I'll get to the sad stuff at the very beginning here, the more reflective stuff, the stuff that I tend to not necessarily avoid on the show, but isn't necessarily creeping its way into our week-to-week conversations, but I like to do this because as someone who suffers from anxiety and depression, as many of you do as well, and especially this year, it's really important, I think, to go back and look at the things we've accomplished over the year. And we can often focus on the negative, especially this year. And this year felt like a billion years long. So I think that it is easy to lose sight of the things that we've done over the year. And so this is kind of a nice way to go back and reflect on the things we've done this year. So I'm going to do what I did last year. I have my calendar up here on my computer, and I am going to go through basically week by week the show and every episode we did in 2020, which is like 60 something episodes. We're talking almost 3 full days of me talking, give you sort of like a little director's commentary almost of things that I've done for the show, and sort of things that things that we talked about, and other things I did that weren't for the show, or like when I recorded what. So again, as I said, people seem to enjoy that. I hope you enjoy that, and that's what we'll be doing. So I'm just going to go through week by week in a moment, but to start with, just some general reflections on this year. Obviously, it's been awful. COVID has been really devastating, and I don't think that people will really be able to fully grasp the impact that it's had, and how many people we've lost, and how many people have suffered from lifelong health effects, even if they did survive. I know a number of people who have died from COVID. I actually worry about you, the listeners, all the time. I've become friends with many of you. I feel like I know you, even if we've never interacted at all. And every week, when I see my numbers, if they dip a little bit, which they have in COVID, I mean, people aren't listening to as many podcasts because they're not traveling as much. They're at home. They don't need the distraction at work. But because I'm a disasterist, I'm like, I hope these people haven't passed away, or I hope they're not sick. So, and I know a number of you have had COVID, and you've emailed me and told me you're doing okay now. And I appreciate that. And I'm so glad that you're better, and I'm sorry that you endured that, and we won't have to deal with it in 2021. So that's sort of the elephant in the room that we'll get out of the way. But I'm feeling good about 2021. Obviously, I had to shift the show to a completely remote show. It's been almost a year since I've recorded an episode with somebody face-to-face, which is really weird for me, given the fact that this show has always been face-to-face, with a small handful of exceptions. I mean, before this year, out of the 400-something episodes I had, I think, I don't know, maybe 10 were remote, something like that. So I had to sort of completely rejigger how I do the show and the kinds of guests I have. But I don't necessarily think it was for, they're the dogs. Hold on one moment. I'm going to go and see if they're attacking somebody breaking into my home. They're fine. It was just a marauding band of Mad Mask-esque. Mad Mask? I mean, it could be Mad Mask. I'm just going to ramble. Anyway, let's get to the beginning of the year. I was talking about how we went remote, but I'll get there as we go through month by month. So let's start with the very first week in 2020, January 1st, 2020, which was a Wednesday. I used to put out episodes every Wednesday. Now I kind of soft put them out on a Monday and promote it on a Tuesday. So if you wait till Wednesdays to download the show, spoiler alert, it's out on Mondays usually. But I don't know why I changed that. But anyway, the first episode of 2020 I did was episode 389 with Lucia Fasano. This is an episode I recorded actually in October 2019 because twice a year I usually go out to LA. I go out for almost the whole month of October and almost the whole month of March, which we will get to in a moment. And I sort of bank episodes. I record as many as I can and sort of spread them out throughout the year. It's sort of like shooting a television series all at once. And so in October of 2019, I was out there as I usually am. I went to my good friend Lenora Claire and her husband Henry Self's wedding, and it was very nice. I talked about that last year. But that was the last sort of full LA trip I've had. And I don't anticipate going out there in 2021, given the state of the world. So it's kind of weird. Like, it'll be the first time in, I think, 12 years that I haven't been in Los Angeles at all, let alone for the 2 months of the year that I normally am. So that is strange. But anyway, this was an episode with Lucia. Lucia is amazing. I first became aware of her because I loved her father's work. Sadly, no longer with us. John Fasano is a writer, director. He did Rock and Roll Nightmare with John Michael Thor, which you may be familiar with. I watch it every year on New Year's Eve, which is probably why I put out Lucia's episode on January 1st. She actually does the commentary track with him for his movie Black Roses, and I think she's like 9 or 10 and is absolutely hilarious. And I thought this girl is very, very funny. I met her when I did the Bridgetown Comedy Festival because at the time she was based out of Portland, Oregon, and we became friends and stayed in touch. And when I was out in LA, I was like, gotta get Lucia on the show. This is a really funny episode. She tells a horrific / amazing story about how when she was a kid, she designed a bunch of Halloween decorations for Target, and one of them showed up in a porno that her brother told her about. So that is, if you haven't heard that episode, that is some good stuff. The next week, January 8th, was 2 guests, Joe Bosroth and April Bowlby. Joe and April have an amazing podcast called 75 Reads. They essentially took David Bowie's list of 75 books everybody should read. They read them together and then they discuss them. It's really fun. April, you probably know as an actor. She is in Doom Patrol as Elastigirl. Joe is incredibly funny and smart. They have a great chemistry. We did this one in October as well. I actually held on to this one because they were on a hiatus from October. I think January 6th, their show started back up again, 2020. So that's why that came out that week. It's a great show. This was really fun. It was just kind of a fun freewheeling episode. The place I rented in LA that trip was in Burbank, and I had basically a whole guest house, but it opened up onto the pool. So we just had like the French doors open. We're like hanging by the pool, chatting face to face. It seems like a billion years ago. But what a fun episode. That was great. Really enjoyed talking to them, and that's a fun one. And also check out their podcast 75 Reads if you haven't. On April 11th, weirdly, April Bowlby, not April 11th, January 11th, 2020. Just a side note, it was the 25th anniversary of the day that the WB network launched. So that was kind of interesting. Ski Patrol came out on January 12th. These are the things I put on my calendar, everybody. I don't know why I do that. It's funny, going back and looking at my calendar, I used to be really cognizant of every single person that was coming through Boston to do any kind of shows or to, just to be in town at all, because I would approach them and say, hey, you want to be on the show? And so I really followed all the show listings and book events and anything like that. And obviously I don't do that now because what's the point? But it's funny seeing all these other things in my calendar of people who were in town and who I reached out to and didn't do the show, and who who came through and played live. It's pretty interesting. On the week of January 13th, 2020, which incidentally, Friday the 13th, 1995 was when Demon Knight came out, Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, which is an excellent movie. I have that on my calendar. This was the first time we've done this. It's sort of a rerun, but this was episode 391. This was our tribute to Allie Willis, who passed away in December of 2019. Thus far, I think the only guest I've had on the show who's passed away, which is kind of incredible, considering I've had about 500 people on, and a lot of the people on the show tend to be older in age. But Allie is and was amazing. She probably best known for writing the Friends theme song, but she wrote songs for Pee Wee Herman. She did a lot of the set design on Just Say Julie. She's just amazing. And I got to go to her house, and I think it was 2016, and record with her. And it was a ton of fun. So last I saw her was actually at that wedding in October. So she passed away suddenly. So I did a sort of a reran that episode, did some new update content for it. And it was weird. I never, once I edit my episodes, I never really listen to them again because, I got other things going on. And some of you have asked this, especially now in lockdown, one episode takes me about 8 to 10 hours, I think, total. And that includes scanning a TV guide, which takes 1 to 2 hours, depending on the TV guide. I literally have to do it page by page. I go through and scan the TV guide. And, that's my dog again. So that takes a while. And then I have to book the guest, and we have to actually sit down and record. And then I have to go through and edit the episode. And then I go through and do the show notes for the episode. And starting in 2020, I started doing a YouTube version of the episode, which takes a little bit of time. So it takes a while. So once I do that, I never want to hear it again. But in some cases, it is kind of nice to go back, because for me, these are sort of like audio vacation slides. The dog is yelling again, so I apologize. It's just going to happen. But I will see what he needs. He's fine. I don't know what that was about. I think weirdly people have gotten used to like dogs in the background, children screaming. Not for me. I don't have children screaming here. But just noises generally, because we live in a Zoom world now. That's where we're at. Anyway, I lost track of what I was saying there. Oh, so don't go back and listen to things very often, but it is kind of nice to have done that. And listen to Allie again, and was nice to remember that sort of nice day that we had together. And you should check out our work and listen to that episode if you haven't. That should be nice. This week was also kind of just a terrible week for me. I broke my toe that week, which if you follow me on social media, you may have seen. So that third week in January, I was taking the garbage out, and clumsily, it was snowy, and we had this like 180 pound, like big, huge industrial trash can that I don't put body parts in. And it like turned, and the lip of it, which is steel, basically hit my toe and almost like sliced it off basically, but it just smashed it. So I couldn't really walk. It was a ton of pain. I couldn't wear shoes. And I was supposed to do a show that weekend for the Boston Comedy Festival, and I couldn't drive. There was a snowstorm. I had to cancel. I never cancel shows. That was a bad week. And my friggin' toe was just a nightmare for weeks. On January 20th that week, Martin Luther King Day, Tony Thaxton was on. This was episode 392. Tony is in Motion City Soundtrack. He is the producer of Allison Rosen's show, which is where I met Tony. He also has a great podcast called Bizarre Albums. He was in town in, I think, November doing a reunion tour with Motion City Soundtrack. So I went over to the old Avalon, which I think is the House of Blues now. And I've been trying to get rid of stuff. And I gave him the biggest box of novelty records, just this huge box of stuff that I thought he could use on the show. And I think he's used some of it on the show at least, but it was heavy as hell. Met him at the show. We recorded backstage. I got to go to the show. It was very cool. It was a great time talking to Tony. That's a fun episode. I know a lot of you have found my show through Allison's show or through Tony's show. So if you missed that episode, that is a good one. Also, I had some people email me. I guess my show's file size is kind of big, so I've tried to make them smaller, because I know some people have data caps on and they listen on their phones. So that was the first episode that people had let me know about that. Did my best. Hopefully that's working out for you. Then on Monday, the 27th, I recorded an episode that I'll actually talk about in a couple episodes, but Gary K. Wolf, I met him at BU. He was an alumni there. We kind of just squatted in one of the student centers, even though neither of us had any business being there, and recorded that episode. That was a really fun day. But that week, episode 393 was Ryan Douglas. Ryan is an old friend. I've known him for like 12 years from Boston Comedy. He moved down to New York ages and ages ago, and so it was great. He came up. We sat in the office that I'm sitting in now and talked. He's really funny. He's a great follow on social media. He doesn't do stand-up anymore. He actually makes bespoke frames, which is pretty cool. But that's a fun episode as well. And again, it's kind of amazing to me that I get to sit down and talk to people I've known forever or that I haven't seen in a while, and we get to chat for a few hours, and I sometimes learn new things about people I've known for decades. And that was a really fun one. So if you missed that one, because you maybe hadn't heard of Ryan, go back and listen to episode 393 with Ryan Douglas. That is one I really enjoyed. And so we move on to February. February was yet another weird month. Episode 394, that first week in February, with Kate Procession. Kate is, again, someone I've known for years from comedy. Kate is an absolute weirdo. I say that as a compliment. She's a librarian. Someone I just am fascinated by ever since I first met her, because I don't understand her at all. She is a wonderful mystery of a human being. Yeah, that's an interesting episode. That is unlike normal people who I talk to. It's more of like an anthropological investigation on my part. But that is Kate Procession. She's very funny as well, and just so odd and strange in the best possible way. February 10th was an interesting day. I got in a major car accident. Which I didn't realize at the time, but I was driving on 93 North, which if you are in the New England area, you are familiar with. And I was on an on-ramp, stopped, and this kid not paying attention. And by kid, I'm using the Boston usage of the word kid, meaning anyone, really. But he was like 19 or something. Just rammed the back of my car going 30, 40 miles an hour. And my car was totaled, and my sunglasses, and I really love those sunglasses. They were prescription. And it shook me up quite a bit. That was interesting. I went in full panic mode and got a new car by the end of the week. Although I did get some insurance money. My car would have been paid off in 2020, and now I have payments. So, this is pre-COVID. These are just like little seedlings of the terribleness that was to come in 2020. So it's fairly shaken up that week. But that week I did do a really fun thing for the Boston Science Fiction Film Festival on February 11th with former guest of the show. We went into the Museum of Science, and we did a live commentary track. It was Rebecca Hussle, by the way. I said a former guest of the show, and I should have mentioned who it was. Dr. Rebecca Hussle. We went into the planetarium, and we did a live commentary for the movie Serenity. And first of all, if you've never seen a movie in a planetarium, that's amazing. Second of all, if you've never seen a sci-fi movie set in space in a planetarium, that's really cool. It was almost like IMAX on one side of the dome, and then the rest of it was all the stars. And so we went through, kind of did an informative commentary that people seem to enjoy. It was very fun. Also, whenever I've gotten to do events at the Museum of Science, it's always at night after they're closed, and there's something just ridiculously appealing about sort of walking around a closed business at night, especially with the Museum of Science, which as a kid was sort of magical, and just being able to wander around there with like no supervision, and it's kind of dark is I don't know. I find that very comforting. But that week was my Gary K. Wolf episode that I had recorded 2 weeks before that. And Gary is a writer. Speaking of science fiction, he's a science fiction writer, but a fascinating guy. He created Roger Rabbit, who you may know from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He wrote that original book. He's written a few sequels as well. Really fascinating guy. I had an amazing time talking to him. We talked about a lot of sort of classic science fiction stuff, 50s television, Saturday morning cartoons, which is what inspired him to write Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That was a great guy. He's Boston based, so it was interesting to me when I found that out, and we sat down and we talked. So that was pretty nice. It was Valentine's Day that week, the week that I got in a car wreck. I didn't spend Valentine's Day with my wife, but I have a good excuse. I spent that day, the entire day, with John Cleese. That was really fascinating. There's a company called Fanmio who weirdly, presciently, started trying to do sort of comic conventions virtually and sort of do these Q&As without people having to be there. That's sort of their business model. And they were doing one with John Cleese, and they had heard of me from the conventions that I usually do. And so he was in Boston. I was in Boston. They called me out of the blue, asked me to sort of moderate, do this interview with John Cleese for this thing. And it was amazing. I spent almost 4 hours, pretty much the whole day with him. Got to get some amazing stories. They edited it down to about 45 minutes and then released it as like a streaming thing. I think it was like $5. Came up pretty good, but and I know people complain that he's like pro Brexit or that he's like an old man, or they've seen him on Twitter, but he was incredibly nice, very funny, very self-effacing, was really open and honest, and it was very, I mean, he's a pretty huge star, and the influence, specifically him, but also just Monty Python in general, has had on the comedy world and the sketch comedy world, and it's so many of the people I have on this show, and how often they come up, is kind of amazing. So I got to talk to him and ask him all kinds of stuff. It wasn't, the TV guidance counselor format. I was behind the camera, but we were face to face, and I am cut out of the final product because the idea is that sort of you are talking to him. You are there. And my questions are sort of, put up on the screen as titles, but that is an amazing day. I'm rarely blown away, and that was pretty great. So in a week that I had a very bad experience, having my car totaled, I'm mostly okay. My back is kind of screwed up still, but it was screwed up before that, and my toe's still broken at this point in February. But then having an amazing experience, it was very surreal and weird and sort of a real breakneck sort of whiplash of emotions. That Saturday, I recorded 2 episodes here. My friend Sarah Faith Alderman, who has a amazing book out that you should buy, her memoir, and Meredith Goldstein came over. I recorded 2 episodes that day. I think they were some of the last episodes I did actually physically in my house. Those come out later in the year, so I'll get to those in a moment. And then that Sunday, I recorded with Kathy Farris, who also came out later, so I'll get to that in a moment. But that week, the 17th, the week after Valentine's Day, I did a special episode. For the first time, my guest was my wife, Rachel Reed. She's been on the show on some of the Halloween specials with other people, but this was just the 2 of us, and we went through, my wife is English, we went through an issue of Radio Times, or TV Times, I think it was TV Times, from the UK that she grew up with. That was pretty fun. It was very strange, but a lot of fun, and it was, again, I live with this person. I've been in lockdown quarantine with this person. This is the only person I've seen for almost a year. But it's nice to kind of sit down and actually, we've been married for like 17 years, to sit and talk, and there's still stuff that we didn't know and was fun and to talk about. So that was interesting. Then the final week of, I guess it's the first week of March. Now, I'd been planning a trip to LA in March, so I'm also trying to book all these shows and stuff. I had planned this since like December of 2019. I had booked an amazing Airbnb. A friend of mine was running in the LA Marathon, so normally I book a Airbnb that's like at least 2 bedrooms, so I can make one into a studio and have people over to record. But my friend was going to be in LA to do that LA Marathon, so I wanted to get like a 3-bedroom place so that she could stay there too, and we could split a place and get, since there's more of us, we could get kind of a cooler place. Got this amazing place with a pool, 1930s sort of Hollywood Hills mansion. I was very excited about it. I'm supposed to go the second week in March, and on February 28th, the last night of February, like 4 days before I'm supposed to go, Airbnb cancels my reservation. So I don't know. The people said there was like a water leak or something in the house. I don't know if there actually was, but man, I panicked. Because 3 days before you're supposed to, go on a trip is not when you want to have to get a new Airbnb. And also that night, I did what turned out to be, I think, I'll see in March, but I think it was the last live show I did, which was February 28th, 2019. I did another live Trump versus Bernie debate with my friends Tony and James. We did these in 2016, which seems like a billion years ago. And this was for the 2020 election, since 2020 had just kicked off. God, Jesus. Thankfully, we won't be doing any more of those again, because they won't be necessary. But that was the last live show I did. Wow, almost a year ago, which is crazy. I mean, I thought I didn't do that many shows generally. Whoop, my tourist trap retro VHS box just fell off the counter. Did anyone guess that's what it was? It's what it sounded like, right? Yeah, I mean, I sort of have a reputation for turning down a lot of shows and not doing a ton of live stuff. But in hindsight, I was, out once a week pretty much. And that was the last show I did. And it was, it was a great show. It was super fun. Those guys are ridiculously talented and funny. It was at the Columbus Theater down in Providence, Rhode Island, which is one of my favorite places. I am sad that I haven't performed there since then. And I had designs on recording an album there. I was going to do another album in 2020. I had a new hour of material, most of which I have forgotten. I have a recording of, I think, about 20 minutes of it. So I don't write anything down, which in hindsight is a little bit of a problem. But I didn't think that this would happen. So I don't know. Maybe if live stuff comes back again and I have no idea. I'm not making any promises, but who knows? Maybe I'll do that record again at some point. But anyway, I had planned on trying to record it down in Providence, but this was the last time I went there. And the whole show, I was like desperately on my phone trying to get a new place rented for my trip to Los Angeles in 3 days, which I found, which is pretty great. So I flew out on Wednesday the 4th to Burbank, and I had found a place by then. I actually went to 2 places. It was a whole thing, but it worked out. It worked out. And that week, episode 398, that's Ryan Shea that I recorded a couple weeks earlier. Ryan is another Boston comic. That was a really fun episode. Interesting guy. Also former punk rock kid. Like myself. He does a lot of taekwondo now. That was a really fun chat. Boston guy, Boston comic. Had a lot of fun talking to him, and that came out while I was flying to LA. So now I'm in LA. I have, 20 episodes planned to record. I solved my last minute Airbnb issue, and I'm like, things are gonna turn around. I picked my friend up at the airport on Friday because she's gotta run the marathon on Sunday, so we do that. We start hearing inklings of coronavirus. There was a lady on my flight out there in like full PPE. But I was just like, okay, we did this with H1N1. We did this with Ebola. It'll be fine. Little did I know. So in LA, I recorded a ton of episodes, but only about half of what I had planned to record. That Monday, I recorded 3 episodes with Nina Bargell, Jesse Thorne, Jordan Morris. I'll get to those in a moment. I guested on Allison Rosen's show again. And I think I was the last guest on her show in person. So in a lot of ways, it feels like life sort of froze in March 2020, and I'm sure you guys feel that way too. But man, that was weird. The Tuesday I recorded was sent to Moses Meekin, who is great. Wednesday was John Ross Bowie. That's Wednesday, March 11th. And then I guested on my friend Sovereign Sire's Important Adults show, which came out, I think, a month or 2 later. The 12th, I did an episode of Dana Gouldauer that never was released because we talked a lot about the coronavirus and virology, and it became kind of hopelessly outdated within like 2 weeks, so I never put it out. The 13th of March, I recorded my final face-to-face episode of 2020 with Joanne Singer, which I'll get to when we get to that episode when it came out. So yeah, Friday the 13th, appropriately, was the last time I recorded an episode with somebody face-to-face. But that week, March 9th, episode 399 is Meredith Goldstein. So that is the one that I recorded at my house the same day I recorded with Sarah Faith. And Meredith writes for the Boston Globe. She has a podcast. She's an author. She's just really cool. That was really fun to talk to her. And I think it was like my second to last face-to-face in my house. My last face-to-face in my house was the one I recorded with Kathy Ferris. That came out the next week on March 16th. Again, super weird. I have a day job, which I'm very lucky and very, I don't want to say blessed because I'm an atheist, but I'm very lucky to have that job. I've worked there for 17 years or something like that. I worked from home most of the time anyway. But it's helped very much during the pandemic. It's also why I thank you guys so much for giving to the Patreon. But if you didn't have the money or it went to someone else more deserving, I totally understood and encouraged that. But I bring it up because I parked at work and took an Uber to the airport when I flew to LA because that is easier. So basically I took an Uber from the airport to my work. And in the interim time, my work had totally shut down. They were no longer allowing people into the office. Excuse me. And so I got there and literally the entire parking structure was empty except for my car, which was weird. It was weird. And so I got my car, drove home. Haven't been in the office since. Haven't really left my house since Monday, March 16th, 2020, the day before St. Patrick's Day. And it was weird. It was weird. And then it got weirder because that Friday I had my shrink visit scheduled with my long-term therapist. She totally saved my life. I don't get into this too much on the show usually, but I do suffer from severe depression and anxiety. I made a lot of progress and then it got really bad over the last 4 years, mostly because of the state of the world. And then in 2015, my mother killed herself in my house, which was very rude. And yeah, it was a whole thing, but she was great. And she died while I was in Los Angeles, just dropped dead, had a brain aneurysm, died. Turned out later it was related to COVID. Had no idea. So I didn't have my weekly therapy that week. And I haven't since. But again, perfect for 2020. Really. I mean, to have that happen, wonderful. But she was a great person, and that was a sad day. And it was about that point that the virus started really kind of careening out of control. And I started seeing people getting sick and people that I've known for a long time pass away or suffer strokes or all kinds of stuff. But that happened that week. Anyway, the next week, March 20th, episode 401, was Nina Bargell. Nina is a writer. She wrote on Lizzie McGuire. She went to college here in Boston, former punk rock kid as well. Super funny, incredibly nice. Really enjoyed talking to her. It was one of those things where you didn't really know each other, but then felt like old friends, or at least I did after we chatted. That was great. On the Sunday, the 29th, I did an episode of the Face to Facts podcast with someone I'll get to in a moment because we had an issue. But I was on that show again. I think it was the third show with David Almeida that I had done with him. I'm hopefully do another one again in 2021. It's a rewatch podcast about the facts of life, which, as you know, is one of my favorite shows. And it's a great show, and I highly recommend you listen to it. And I also recorded with Kelly Dunham, which we had planned to do remotely before I went to LA. So it was kind of my first remote episode. I was still kind of feeling out how to do this on my computer. I had mailed her a physical TV guide. She's a nurse, so sort of COVID came up and that kind of thing. It was interesting. But that was a fun episode, which will come out later. That week on March 30th is the episode I did with Jesse Thorne, he of Bullseye, he of Judge John Hodgman. I recorded that in LA. I got to go to the Max Fun Studios, and I recorded with him and Jordan the same day in a real recording studio, which I think I've only recorded this show in and not in my house or sort of guerrilla style with my portable stuff, maybe 2 or 3 times. But that was fun, and it's a great episode, and Jesse's a really good dude, and I had a lot of fun chatting with him. And then on Thursday the 2nd, I recorded remotely with Scott Weinberg, the film critic and an awesome dude who sadly lost his father to COVID this year, and that's brutal. But someone I've known through social media for years. We've never met in person, but we did do this episode remotely, and it's a really fun episode, and I think you'll enjoy it. And growing out of that, we ended up doing some Patreon only episodes of his podcast where we talked about television series based on movies, and that was really fun. So check that out if you are not a regular listener of his show. On to April 2020. You guys tired of me yet? Tired of me? April. So this was sort of the first full month in lockdown. So this is when stuff started. This is when shit got real. I feel like the real world there. Like I should be like, I stopped being nice and started getting real. But no, this is when it kind of sunk in that this was going to be a while. And at least for me it did. And I don't know if it did for everybody else. But this is when I was like, this is going to be till at least June. June 2020 was my thought. But I had a good backlog of episodes from LA. So I was like, hey, this will probably get me through until this ends. So Jesse was the first one in April. Second one was Jordan, episode 403 that I recorded right before I left. Then the next week was Senta Moses, who is really funny. Again, great LA trip. These are all face-to-face episodes that I really enjoyed doing and didn't know they would be the last ones I did, maybe ever, but for a while. And then John Ross Bowie from Speechless, who is just the best dude. I could have talked to him forever. That was amazing. Really loved that episode. And then Joanne Singer, who I had met via Twitter and who was a second AD, assistant director on, and worked on like every sitcom ever. Her father was sort of a legendary persona in the world of sitcoms and television. Such a great behind the scenes episode. Maybe my favorite episode of that trip out there. But so April, it was still kind of like, all right, these are still face-to-face episodes. I can still kind of pretend that things are normal. I haven't gone fully remote yet. I did an episode on April 17th of former guests of the show, Kelly McFarland and Dan Crone. They started a daily, or at least Monday through Friday, kind of Facebook Live video show called I'm Fine, because they weren't doing shows that I think they were like, oh, we'll do this till the lockdown's over. They gave that up after about a month, but that was fun to chat with them. That was kind of the first, I think, video thing I did. I usually don't do video enabled, or I didn't when I would do remote episodes. So that was interesting. That was a taste of things to come. And on Monday, April 20th, I recorded the first time with David Almeida from Face the Facts podcast. That was a great chat. That was my first, like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to buckle down and do some remote ones to pad to pad my backlog a little bit, so I don't panic. I recorded it. We did like a 2-hour episode. I go to play it back, and his entire side of the conversation is completely garbled digitally. I had no idea what happened. I panicked. I called the official TV guidance counselor IT department, which is Giovanni from Podgods and Classic Loveline, who is an awesome dude and a friend of mine. And he was like, oh yeah, your hard drive's garbage. So I had some old spinning hard drive, and I needed to get a solid state hard drive because it wouldn't, I don't know what was going on. Panicked, had to rebuild my entire computer with Giovanni on the phone like I was defusing a bomb, and the episode was unsalvageable. I felt so bad about it. I've only lost like 3 episodes, I think, total in all the years I've been doing this show, and that was one of them. I was completely embarrassed. I felt bad that David spent all that time talking to me and then was gone. So I was like, we need to do this much further in the future because this is awful. But got the computer up and working again. Basically built a brand new computer for the 27th of April when I recorded with Kate Kennedy, who is amazing. I love Kate. She's great. I had never met her before. She was a friend of a friend on Twitter and was like, hey, I'll do anyone's podcast. Anyone doing a podcast? And someone was like, hey, do Ken's podcast. Had a great time chatting with her. She's a comedian and an adult performer, and really smart and funny and interesting. And hopefully I'll meet her in person someday. We'll grab some lunch because, again, it's really weird for me to predominantly be doing these episodes remotely with people that I've never met. And I know a lot of people do that, and that's kind of standard for a lot of things. And it's really weird for me because I'm not a journalist. I don't, it's kind of wanting to hang out with people is sort of one of the reasons I do the show. So that was weird. And then May 1st, I recorded with Stephanie Erb, who did the video show Therapy with Pammy. And I was going to do, that was an episode that we had scheduled to do in Los Angeles, and we canceled because of COVID. So we did it remotely, and it worked out fine. It was great to talk to her again. Hadn't met her in person. She's done a lot of cool stuff. That was a fun episode. And I put that out a couple weeks later. So we are into May now. We're into May. The first week in May is the episode I did with Kelly Dunham. That was the sort of first remote episode that I had planned to do before the thing. Then the week after that, I did Dead Air Dennis's podcast. He has a podcast called What You Really Do about comedians with day jobs. And I did that remote face-to-face via Zoom, or actually I think it was Zencast maybe. He was using one of those platforms. It actually worked really well. So if you missed me on that, you can look that up or email me at ken@icanread.com or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. And I'll look it up and send you a link. I'm just going to Google it, so you could probably too, but I'll look it up for you. That's a nice chat about like day jobs and comedy and all that kind of stuff if you're into that sort of stuff. That week also the episode with Kate Kennedy came out. I still hadn't quite mastered how to get good quality out of the remote stuff or the best quality. It's still a great episode content-wise. She's great to talk to, but I was still sort of learning as I went along, which is kind of amazing because, 7+ years into this, I'm still learning stuff. Obviously, the tech stuff makes sense, but I had to kind of relearn how to communicate with people in the show and how to interview people and interact with people and win them over. And that sounds stupid, but it was a totally different skill set, and it was like totally relearning over again. And I feel like I got there eventually, but there was a learning curve for sure. And it was tough. But I got there. That weekend I recorded with Eric Fusco, who is a longtime listener to the show, really interesting guy. I have met him in person years ago in New York, so that was not weird. And then Monday, May 19th, I did Allison Rosen's pod again, and it was a reunion of the same crew that did her last in-person show in March, and that was interesting. Was weird. It was fun, but strange. And I've done her show, I think, 4 or 5 times since lockdown happened. So if you haven't heard me there's a bunch of episodes there. They're always fun chats. If you discovered my show because I was on Allison's, hello, thank you for coming over to my show. I appreciate it. You guys are the best. She has a very loyal, smart fan base, and I am honored and humbled to siphon off any of that I have. That week also was the week that Scott Weinberg's podcast, Stephanie Erb's came out. It's episode 409, the third week in May 18th, that I recorded earlier. Is this confusing everybody yet? I solicited questions from people if they wanted me to talk about them, and I got none. But if you do have questions, or this episode reminds you of questions you have for me, if you've made it this far into the episode, you can hit me up on social media at TV Guidance or at Kenneth W. Reed. And you can also email me, as I said before, at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, which I say is my on hiatus stand-up page. Also, I used to have a TeePublic store that had all the TV Guidance Counselor sort of shirt designs. I was doing like an artist series. Box Brown had done a shirt. There'd been some by Sam First from Monsters Are Good. Sarah Cronin had done a great shirt, and I had a bunch of shirts that were also like old defunct New England businesses, and T Public just shut it down without any kind of warning. And so that happened in May. And, like I said, I have a day job, but that was like good for like $100 a month that I used to make. I made $2 a shirt. So that was a financial hit. And also my wife had been laid off in November of 2019, but thankfully started a new job literally the day before lockdown in March. Again, we're incredibly lucky that she had that, but it was, a little bit less money. So we were taking some hits. And I started feeling incredibly guilty for having a job in lockdown, seeing all my friends who are in the creative arts or who work in the restaurant industry or all that being out of work. And so I gave to every GoFundMe and every Patreon and bought everyone's stuff on Etsy, and I kind of lost my mind a little bit there because I just felt like this weird survivor's guilt and was like, well, I have good credit. I have a credit card. I can get this money to people now. I'll pay it up whenever. God knows. Anyway, that was embarrassing. But I did my best to help, and I'm still doing it, but in a little bit less, less crazy of a way. But that was going on at this time. I bought a cabin tent, which I talked about on Allison's show in May, which was like a 3-room tent that kind of seemed like a log cabin. It was $100 on clearance, and put it up in my yard and had like a full-size bed in there and a little TV, and it would sit in there and kind of read comics and just like weirdly try to get out of the house that way and feel it was somewhat successful. It was kind of cool to have, and over the summer we had some major storms, like huge hurricane type storms, and it just totally destroyed the tent. But I got, a couple months out of it, so I guess that was worth the money. Also around this time, I sort of stumbled into making daily videos where, I don't know, just little shorts that I was slightly inspired by, like Len Cella's Silly Cinemas on TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes. Started doing them daily, and again I was like, I'll just do these one a day for lockdown because it can't be that long, and I think I did like 100 and something of them, and I started buying like little miniature things because those worked out well on doing the thing. I had a few just like laying around my house that I bought over the years, like a little luchador ring and stuff, that a little bozo punching bag and stuff that I had just sort of collected here and there, and used those at first, and then I started running out of stuff. So I was like looking up miniature things and realizing there's this whole world of them, and being impressed and buying way too many of them just for these videos. I retaught myself video editing, so I guess that was a good skill that I had forgot about because I went to college for it. I used to be certified on Avid, which I don't even think anyone uses anymore because this was 20 years ago. But retaught myself, got some video editing software. Some of them are pretty fun. I recreated an entire Super Toy Run in miniature, which is something that I always wanted to do. That was funny. And I started doing like dances on Friday. It was, we all lost our minds a little bit, everybody. But I did those essentially until the sort of Black Lives Matter stuff really made me feel stupid doing anything dumb, because it seemed like everything was just trivial and people were dying, and I'm like, what, this is dumb, and I feel like an idiot. So I stopped doing them, but also I kind of ran out of ideas, and I think I've done like 3 or 4 since then, but there's a bunch. I made a playlist on YouTube of them if you want to see them for some reason. Also tried doing them on TikTok, and I still don't understand TikTok, and they blocked a couple of them because I had a switchblade, because in 2019, I sound crazy here, but I get obsessive, and I just started buying switchblades. I was getting a lot of death. I don't know what was going on there, but so I did this like video of different switch, I don't know, but they were like, oh, this is violent, you can't do this. So I stopped doing that. Anyway, so I'm making these daily lockdown videos. I have a tent in the backyard. We're at the last week in May. The 26th, I did a really fun, I guested on John Hodgman, who was doing a daily show at that time called Get Your Pets on Instagram. And I did an episode of that with John until my Wi-Fi crapped out on me. But me and Ted guested on John's show. That was a great show. He's still doing it occasionally here and there. But man, that was fun. The same day, excuse me, the same day I recorded with Kathy Valentine of the Go-Go's, who I absolutely love. We've been sort of social media friends for years, and I've never met Kathy, but I'm so in awe of her talent and her abilities in general. She's a great songwriter, just a fascinating person, and she wrote an amazing autobiography called All I've Ever Wanted, which I did read in lockdown and then listen to the audiobook, which I highly recommend you get both. The audiobook she did like a whole soundtrack for. It's like a whole different experience. And in general, actually, one of the things I started doing in lockdown was finally listening to audiobooks that I had forever. I'd done a bunch of work for Audible over the years, and kind of every time you would do work for them, they would throw you like a stack of coupons for free books, and I never really used them, or I did and would just have the books in this library on Audible. So I started listening to a lot of that stuff. I listened to Under the Big Black Sun and More Fun in the New World, the John Doe sort of curated books about LA punk. Oh, excuse me. And I'm not going to cut that out. I'm just talking. I'm not going to cut it out. You had to deal with it. I apologize. Which again are amazing, have great soundtracks. I listen to Our Band Could Be Your Life. There's a lot of music books, which I weirdly found inspiring because I was having a lot of trouble getting inspired in any way or feeling like I was doing anything of value. And weirdly listening to all those sort of biographical books about the punk DIY scene really was inspiring, like truly. And I recommend them. They were really great. And Kathy's book is right in there with all those because it fits into that scene. It's she grew up in Texas and before she got out there, but anyway, she did the show because she was promoting the book, and this was remote. It was a success. I don't think she hated me. We talked about TV because TV actually figures a lot into her book. She was sort of inspired to be a female rock musician because she saw Suzi Quatro on Top of the Pops. And I'm going to take a drink right now. Hold on one moment. Again, not cutting it out. I've been talking for an hour, and my voice is losing. Anyway, Kathy Valentine, amazing episode. It comes out in June later. I've recorded it in May. If you haven't heard that one, please do. It is great, and read her book. Scott Weinberg's episode came out that week that we had recorded earlier. On Thursday, the 28th, I recorded with Anna Lee, who is a pioneer in VR adult film. I never met her in person, but we both appeared on Sex Life in early 2019, which is an Epics series, and then kind of became social media friends via that. And she's great. We are very similar in many ways, oddly. And we recorded forever. It was a really nice chat. It was one of those things that I missed in lockdown, where sort of sitting down and chatting with someone you sort of know and becoming friends and realizing you have a lot in common. And it was just a nice little social visit. And that comes out later. The first week in June. We are now on day 80. I don't know why I said that like Martha Stewart. Wow, what a Boston accent. Martha Stewart. Day 80 of lockdown. Now, June is always a weird month for me. It's my birthday month. My birthday is June 28th, everybody. I don't know if I'm supposed to share that kind of content with people. But this June 2020, I was turning 40 years old. I had kind of a weird existential midlife crisis in 2019 at age 39, and I was like, 40, man, there's all kinds of stuff I'm gonna do. I'm gonna live life like I never have. I've always been too playing it safe, and I've had to be an adult since I was 12, but all that. I won't get into the therapy that I desperately need because my therapist died in March, but I was like, that's what I'm going to do this year. And then we had lockdown, and I was turning 40 that month, and that was weird. But, that's what happened. So first week in June is, again, that Sarah Faith Alterman episode. She has an amazing book. It's a memoir. I recommend it very much. It's called Let's Never Talk About This Again. We had recorded that back in February before I went to Los Angeles. And so that is you hearing the last in-person episode of the year, even though I recorded it before the last in-person episode of the year that I recorded. Does that make sense? I don't know. It doesn't. But that, again, fun episode. She's an old friend. We talked about the show 15 and a bunch of other stuff. Had a good time. Haven't seen her since. Hanging out with friends, guys. I miss it. Thursday the 4th, finally I had on, and this is where lockdown was sort of it's hard to even frame it this way, but was sort of good in that I'm mostly in Boston, always in LA, occasionally in New York, or other New England. New York. I know New York's not New England, but East Coast cities, to do the show face to face. And then there are a bunch of people that I've always wanted to have on that either don't come here often or aren't in the same place as me. And I don't really talk to them because I didn't do remote episodes, people in London, people in Philadelphia, and that sort of stuff. And so I said, well, now is the time to do it. And I talked to Joel Hodgson. Joel is, of course, the creator of Mr. Science Theater 3000, someone who I've admired for a really long time. I've met Joel in the past briefly, but he is very good friends with Dana Gould and Nell Scavell and other people that I'm friends with. And I always wanted to have him on the show, and we had talked about doing it before. And anytime he's been in New England, he's been here for events, and it's been very busy. But he was at home in Philadelphia, and so we recorded, and I had Joel on, and that was amazing. I can't believe the number of people from Mystery Science Theater 3000 that I've had on this show. That show was everything to me growing up. I still watch it literally every night when I'm going to sleep, which sounds insane, but it's still a huge part of my life, as well as riff tracks. And so the number of people from that show that I've had on is astounding, including the new one as well. And so it was great to talk to Joel. So that was really fun. I love talking to Joel. He was very complimentary, which sort of got to me. Because I'm damaged, but just hearing him compliment the show and the concept was like, I was almost moved to tears. If I had a heart or a soul, everybody. The next week, which started with day 87 of lockdown, excuse me, I don't have COVID. It's just talking this long. And again, thank you for listening. I forgot that last year I regretted doing this about 5 minutes into it. But that's fine. So we had Joel recorded that week, although it doesn't come out to the end of the month. And then day 87, June 8th, that week, episode 412, Eric Fusco comes out. Eric is great. That was a fantastic chat. The next week is the Kathy Valentine episode. That's episode 413. Oh, I also want to mention earlier, first week in June, I did the A Star Is Born podcast, which was a listener of Allison Rosen's show, asked me to do that. That was a lot of fun. If you haven't heard that, you want to Google it. That's when it came out. I'm on it. I chat about all kinds of stuff. Also around this time, I started to explore YouTube. This sounds really stupid, but people had asked me if I could put up episodes on YouTube. And since I got a video editing software, I was able to put up, the audio with static images and put them up on YouTube. So I started every episode I started also releasing on YouTube. I also went back and made video versions of about like 70 episodes and put those up on YouTube. So if you use YouTube on your TV, or it's easier for you, some people it is, you want to put those up there. They're all up there. So I was poking around on YouTube a lot more. Excuse me. And hold on one moment. I need to clear my throat. Hold on a moment. Also this week, I started doing some like Zoom game nights with friends, which I was adverse to. Hadn't really thought of doing before, but I did with Sean Sullivan and Will Smalley and other people who've been on the show, and that was fun. I haven't done it since, probably because they hate me and didn't want me to do it with them anymore. But it was nice that they asked me in the first place. I don't really think they hate me. They might a little bit. I probably ruined their night. I know Casey Malone hates me. But it was nice to include me. I did do that. I have a reputation amongst my comedian friends in Boston as a cantankerous jerk. But they thought of me, so that was nice. Again, it actually really was nice to see people that I haven't seen in a while, and to just see people and talk and interact with them. And now we're 6 months into lockdown. So, I mean, not 6 months into lockdown, but we're 6 months into the year. We're halfway through the year, which felt like way more than a year. But I turned 40. That was depressing. But my point being, so I started being on YouTube a lot, and I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and which I had never really explored before, and YouTubers and that sort of stuff. And one of them was Joseph de Benedictis, he's a really nice, amazing, funny Canadian guy, was doing these American versus Canadian snack food videos that I just fell in love with. And so contacted Joseph. We recorded it on the 22nd of June, day 101 of lockdown. That episode will come out in July. And so there's a bunch of YouTubers that I really started liking, and that was fun. Like I started watching the Try channel, which I'm sure everybody knows about all these forever. But that's the Irish People Try. There's some really funny people on there who hopefully I'll have on the show in the future. Also really got into this girl, Jade the Libra, because, and I'll get to it later, but one of the things I missed the most, because the lockdown was, I loved going out to the stores and buying the seasonal stuff. So like Halloween decorations and like looking at what Home Goods has. So I was searching on YouTube for people who didn't care about COVID or were going out to these stores just to see what they had, like at Target and stuff, and stumbled upon her stuff. But I guess she started as a makeup blogger, but is very charming and funny, and her decor hunting videos are great. So anyway, had Joseph on because I loved his videos, and you should check them out. And that episode is very fun. It comes out in July, or came out in July. It's January now, almost. So time is very strange now. Anyway, that week, Anna Lee's episode came out that we recorded beginning of the month. And then on June 29th, the day after my birthday, where I turned 40, unfortunately, day 107 of lockdown, I did an episode with Julia Sutherland, who is a fantastic Scottish comedian who, again, I'd never met, but I enjoyed her work and followed her on Twitter. And she was like, hey, I want to be on people's podcasts. So we made it happen. The day after, on June 30th, Box Brown, who I mentioned earlier with his designs on TeePublic, which incidentally, I have a new TeePublic store. Actually, I have two. I have one that's just TV Guidance Counselor stuff. So if you search TV Guidance Counselor under users on TeePublic, it'll be all the various TV Guidance Counselor t-shirts that you can also get on like mouse pads. And I don't even know if you can get them on mouse pads, on like phone cases and all kinds of other things. But he did a great design for me, I think in 2018. But he has a new book out called Child Star, which if you are a fan of this show, you will love. It is sort of a fictional account of a child star in graphic novel form. And he did a virtual book event that I hosted, and that was a lot of fun. It was the first kind of virtual event that I did. I've turned down a ton of stand-up virtually because I don't think I can do it well. I've watched a bunch of shows just to see how people were doing it, and I don't want to say other people don't do it well. It doesn't seem to work for me. It's just, you need to do something different. And this was like a cool interview. There were questions, it was interactive. We talked about the book, and there was a lot of stuff there. So I think that's available online. I will look it up and see if it is somewhere. And if you want to see it, you can, because it's there. But also buy his book. It's very, very, very good. Again, perfect book if you're a fan of this show. On to July, where my first recorded episode is Stephanie Crawford, who, again, somebody I've never met, but whose work I love. I know her through social media, is a great film critic, writer, and would love to have had her on the show for a long time, but we weren't in the same city. She lives in Las Vegas, but boom, COVID. Had her on the show. By this time, I also figured out that I can scan TV guides instead of physically mailing them, mostly because I didn't want to go to the post office, but also it's free to not mail them and to scan them. It just takes me like 2 hours, but it's worked out, and it's better that way too, because then we both have sort of a PDF copy, and we can kind of both look at it at the same time, and it works. Stephanie's great, a kindred spirit, and I love her work. And it was great to talk to her. So that was my first episode recorded in July. The Joel Hodgson episode was the first one out in July. I also did Alison Rosen show again on July 7th. So that was a fun one. And that is the week that Joseph de Benedictis' episode came out, the YouTube guy. That weekend, I also did Scott Auto, who is a great Boston comic, who was doing Zoom versions of sort of Hollywood Squares. So I did that as well. I was the center square, and I was not as good as Paul Lind, but who is. And that week of July 13th, Julia Sutherland's episode came out. And I also recorded 3 episodes that week with Dave Holmes, Sarah Rodman, and Gabby Moss, who I'll get to when those episodes come out. July 20th, Stephanie Crawford's episode came out. And the 21st, I recorded with DB Sweeney. And I had actually talked to DB about doing an episode when I was in Chicago last summer. And we couldn't work it out because I was there for work and there just wasn't time. So we actually got to do it this time, and DB was a great dude, and it was a really fun episode, and I don't see enough interviews with him, so I really enjoyed talking to him. That was a fun one. If you missed that, check that one out with DB Sweeney. And DB has made a web series that is called Too Dumb Mix. It's very funny. He only did 1 episode thus far because of COVID, but you should check that out and you will enjoy it because I did. So that was, I recorded on the 21st, Stephanie Crawford's episode that came out that week. Then that Friday, I recorded with Joe Brand, which I'll get to in a moment. Monday, July 27th, I guested for the first time on Sean Sullivan's podcast, Two Boys in a Balcony, which he started last year with Bill McMorrow. Sean is my muse and inspiration behind the show, my old comedy friend. And this show started, their show, Two Boys in a Balcony, started as a weekly podcast where they sort of review New England set movies. They expanded that as they went on. But this was the first time I guessed it. I think I might have been their first guest. We talk about One Crazy Summer, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. So go back and listen to that episode. That week, episode 419 of TV Guidance Counselor, Dave Holmes. Dave was another guy who I've wanted to have on the show for years. We've gone back and forth, and it just hasn't worked out. We were supposed to do it in LA when I was there in March, but then COVID happened, so we did it remotely, but it was really fun, really great episode. Love Dave. That is sort of a classic quintessential episode of the show. Also, that day that episode came out, I recorded with another Mr. Science Theater 3000 person, Kevin Murphy, and I'll get to that when that episode comes out. Frank Wally. I called him Wally. It's Whaley. I did this in the episode too. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I mispronounce things. Frank Whaley I recorded with on July 30th. Frank is one of my all-time favorite actors. I love everything he did. He's super funny, nice guy. He and his wife started a podcast just as lockdown started called The Whaley Family Hour. And it's still going. It's very entertaining, sometimes only 10 minutes. It's like a daily Monday through Friday thing. They're both very, very smart and funny, great chemistry, and it's great. I do really like the fact that so many people were sort of forced to start podcasts in this time because we get some great things like that we wouldn't otherwise. So I recorded with Frank that week, comes out a little bit after that. We are on to August. Are you guys bored of me yet? Do you hate me? Because I hate me. I don't really hate me. Sometimes I do. I go back and forth. At this time in the year, I'd kind of given up on the videos. I'd given up on the stupid miniature stuff. Although I did recreate my childhood video store movies on video in miniature, which I still have a bunch of tiny video cassettes, and I don't know what I was thinking there. And I started getting really into tiki drinks, which I always have been. But when I was in LA in March, before all the restaurants and stuff closed, I rented a place near the Tonga Hut in North Hollywood, which is one of the classic old tiki bars, and hung out there a lot. I went there almost every night till they weren't open anymore, having virgin tiki drinks, because if you don't know, I don't drink. I always loved that stuff. So I started making all kinds of virgin tiki cocktails, and I bought these non-alcoholic spirits from this company called Liars, were actually really good. So I started getting all into that. These are the hobbies that we got into over the years. And speaking of YouTubers, I got into the How to Drink channel, which is this guy, Greg, who I asked to be on the show. He was up for it, but we haven't been able to do it yet. But that's a really fun YouTube channel where he just mixes different drinks. And that's been one of the things I got into watching. So I started making all kinds of tiki drinks, which I don't do now. But we all got into these hobbies as lockdown happened. Let me know what your hobbies were so I don't feel as crazy. You can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. So that week was Dave Holmes. The first week in August 3rd was that week, Sarah Rodman did the show. And Sarah was, for a long time, the TV and music critic for the Boston Globe. He's a Boston person and now works at Entertainment Weekly, so I thought would be a great person to have on the show. Always wanted to talk to her. We had a great chat. It was about a time in television where I'm a little foggy, which was great. I think we did 2004, which was the first year that she was a TV critic. So that was a very interesting episode. And on Thursday the 6th, I recorded with the one and only Scott Valentine. So we'll get to that when that episode comes out. August 10th that week, I recorded with David Almeida again. This was take 2 of the episode that I lost. Was it, I'm not doing the math, 4 months earlier when I had to rebuild my computer. David was incredibly nice about it. He didn't mind. We recorded a really good chat that was just enough time in between that we didn't rehash everything we already did, but was interesting and fun. Another Boston guy, really, really fun episode. And also the day after I recorded with Jake Fogelnest, which I'll get to in a moment. So on August 12th, that was episode 421 with Gabrielle Moss. Gabrielle's another person who somehow I've never met in person, but we have so many mutual friends and our paths have crossed many times over the years. And she wrote an amazing book called Paperback Crush about, Jesus, 3 or 4 years ago now, about sort of teen girl books of the 80s and 90s, like Babysitter's Club and that sort of thing. That is essential. Get it. It's a fun, good read, and she's super smart and funny. Had a great time talking to her. Hopefully someday I can treat her to lunch or something in person if we ever see people again. That's a fun episode. The next week, August 17th, I recorded 2 episodes in one day. One with Eric Deggans, who is the TV critic for NPR. Super smart guy. Really love his writing. This was a great episode. We talked about The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer, and he had some amazing insights and personal stories about that. We talked about 1997, I believe, which was the first year he was a TV critic. Again, really smart guy, sort of the great cultural studies stuff that I always like to do on the show. And then after that, late night, I recorded with Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys. Jello's a guy that I've known for years, from bands and stuff. We first tried to record maybe 4 years ago when I was in San Francisco to do Sketchfest. Remember festivals, everybody. I don't know if I'll ever do them again. Couldn't work out the timing. Then we were going to record in Colorado last year. Yeah, when I was doing the Denver Pop Culture Con, but he was there DJing and didn't work out again. One note about Denver Pop Culture Con, that is something I look forward to every year for the last 5 years since I started doing it, and they were nice enough to invite me out, and I would just have a great time. I would probably get I don't know, 8 or 9 episodes out of it because I get to interview amazing people. I was really looking forward to this year. There were some great guests they had lined up, including Michael Nesmith, who's one of my white whales, although I have had Mickey Dolenz on the show. And obviously it was canceled because of COVID, and their 2021 edition is canceled as well. They're a great organization that put on Denver Pop Culture Con. They're called Pop Culture Classroom, and the show was funding their whole charity, which helps kids with literacy and art and at-risk kids, and so 90% of their budget came from the show. So they are hurting, and if you want to be able, if you can give them something, I've given them some stuff. If you can throw a couple bucks their way, buy some merch, something like that, that will be helpful because they are not going to have a convention next year either. But anyway, no Colorado trip for me this year. And I always like going to Colorado and seeing you guys who listen to the show, who find me at that show, and it's always fun. So anyway, didn't hook up with Jello then, so we did it that night, and I'll get to that in a moment. August 24th that week, recorded with Amanda Reyes. We'll get to that in a moment. And Kate O'Riordan, who is an old friend, get to that in a moment. And Gary Gulman. I was just busting them out. But that week is the week my episode with Joe Bryan came out. And Joe is somebody whose work I've admired for decades, since I lived in the UK in the early 2000s. Just a brilliant stand-up, a brilliant writer. If you haven't seen any of the show, she's written Getting On, a bunch of other stuff. She's got a cat rescue reality show that's on Netflix in the US. Super smart, super nice, incredibly quick. I cannot thank her enough for taking the time to do it. I was bowled over by the fact that she did it. If you're unfamiliar with her, check out her stuff. That is a really fun episode. That was sort of the highlight of, I think, lockdown, or that's sort of when stuff started clicking, and I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Maybe I'll get some good stuff out of lockdown. And stuff started really kind of falling into place. That is a great episode. if I do say so myself. I did Brett White's podcast that week. Brett has a show called Must Have Seen TV. He calls himself the TV Guide. We recorded that on the 30th of August, and it came out the week after that. If you missed me, check that out. The week of August 31st, which was day 170 of lockdown, my episode with Caitlin Hugh came out. She is the on-screen partner of Stephanie Erb, who did Therapy with Pammy web series. Again, we were supposed to do that in March when lockdown happened, but we didn't get to it because of COVID. Great chat with her. I was glad we finally got to be able to do this. On to September. We're getting there. We're 2/3 of the way done, everybody. Again, I think it's good to look back on this stuff. It's interesting. Even for me, like, I'm kind of shocked going back and seeing all the great guests that I've had and remembering that I had some good conversations and was still able to do some fun stuff despite the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. I know that it's going to be continued tough times, but I think that we'll at least have somebody in charge who's not a criminal and an idiot, and we have a vaccine, and all this stuff. You don't need to hear it from me. There's smarter people than me that'll talk about this stuff, but I hope by spring 2021, summer 2021, we can start coming out of our holes and hugging people again. I've never been a hugger, but if you see me in person and we are over with this disease, hug me. I need it. We'll hug. We're not going to make out. We'll hug. But anyway, September. Caitlin's was the first episode. Then the week of Labor Day, September 7th, was my episode with Kevin Murphy. And Kevin, you probably know as Tom Servo from Mystery Science Theater 3000, and he's at Riff Tracks, and super nice guy, smart guy. Never met in person, but again, have a ton of mutual friends. We've been social media friends for a long time. And we talked about the year of the moon landing. And Kevin had some specific personal stories about that, and it was really fun. I really loved talking to Kevin about that. Then on to Friday that week. This was the first week we did 2 episodes. I was contacted by a PR guy who worked for Joseph K., who had a new show on NBC called Transplant. He's a Canadian showrunner, and this is a Canadian American co-production medical drama. And I was able to watch the first 3 episodes before you, which made me feel kind of special. I actually really loved him. It's a really well done show, and was just recently renewed for a 2nd season. So I'm pretty happy about that. So I got to talk to Joseph. That was a great conversation. I think my 3rd Canadian guest of 2020, but really smart guy. I am always fascinated by showrunners, and it's something I would have loved to have done had my life been different. But check out that show Transplant with Joseph K. September 14th, back to school, except we're not. That is the week that the episode I recorded with Frank Whaley came out. Frank is the best guy. If he's been in so many good things. Love his work. He is super funny, humble, nice guy. Literally one of my all-time favorite actors. So it was great to get to talk to him. And the week after that, September 21st, I recorded Allison Rosen's podcast again. And that was the week that my episode with Scott Valentine came out. Now, Scott is a guy that I've known for years through mutual friends, and obviously I always liked his work. You know how much I discuss My Demon Liver on the show. Scott quit acting decades ago, but is a super nice guy, doesn't do a ton of interviews, and it was so nice to sit down and do the show. He moved back to the East Coast recently, so hopefully when this is all over, I can drive out and he and I can have a meal. But what a great episode. Just a really good dude. Amazing stories about show business, and led a pretty fantastic life. If you missed episode 428 with Scott Valentine, do yourself a favor and go back and listen to that episode because it's great. Final week in September. When do we got? October, November. So we got 3 more months, guys. I was on Two Boys in a Balcony podcast again, and we discussed the movie Session 9, which is a great movie. They kind of hated it, but I think I turned them around on it because we were getting into the Halloween season. So if you haven't seen Session 9, watch it and then listen to that episode of Two Boys in a Balcony. That was day 198. of lockdown. And that is the week that my episode with Jake Fogelnest came out. Jake is sort of bizarro me in a lot of ways. And again, somebody who I've weirdly never met in person somehow. We run in the same circles, have so many of the same friends, so many of the same interests, and we got along like a house on fire. Awesome dude, great chat, as you would imagine. It is a super nerdy, great version of this show. And also that week, on the Friday, I had Gigi Garner on, who is James Garner's daughter. Somebody requested I have her on the show, and we made it happen. She runs an amazing animal rescue now, had some great stories, got her on the phone, and we had a great chat, and I thank her for doing that. And again, if you can give to a charity, go back and listen to that episode. There's all the details about the charity she runs. It's her, basically, there, and had a great chat with her. It's always interesting to hear from sort of second generation Hollywood people, and she's smart and funny, and has a very interesting story in life, and is doing good work with dogs, who I love. October 5th, that week, is the episode with Eric Deggans that came out. October was a hard month. It hit me that I lost the whole summer with my birthday. Pete's yelling again. Hold on a moment, everybody. Pete's been yelling a lot. It's weird with the dogs because they have been home nonstop for like almost a year. And I work from home mostly anyway, but I'd be out of the house every now and then. And I don't think I've left the house for more than an hour to like go to the doctor or like pick up a prescription or something since March. So they are very used to me being here, and it's going to be weird. But anyway, October was particularly hard. I actually really love the summer, and it kind of started to hit me that, I totally missed out on summer. I didn't go to the beach or anything. And October, as a huge Halloween fan, that's the month. And I'm also usually in LA, which had hit me that I wasn't there this year. And so it was a weird, hard month. But I've, got through it. We all did. Maybe it hasn't hit me yet that this is like a lost year. We've lost so much time, but I'm not going to philosophize on that. Eric Deggans, as I said, recorded Super Smart Guy. Great episode. That is episode 431, which came out week of October 5th. October 12th, I went and got a COVID test. I thought I had fallen. I don't know if I had. I was like, how the hell on earth could I get COVID? Because I haven't interacted with anybody. But my chest was hurting, and I had some seasonal allergies. And I went, and I didn't have COVID. And it's an unpleasant test, but everyone should get it. It's free. But I realized that the week before, early morning, had slipped on the stairs outside and fallen down the flight of stairs and had a huge bruise on my chest, and that's where my chest hurt. And it's stupid. I'm an idiot. But week of October 12th, episode 432, Lois Bromfield, who's a comedian whose work I always loved. She's super smart, really funny, has lived in Germany for the last few years. Again, never met in person, but I've always admired and been social media friends with. She has a book out, a memoir about her time in comedy. She still does comedy, as much as any of us do. That is really great. And you should check it out. And I loved talking to her. That was really great. She's, written for Roseanne and just amazing stories. That was the week of October 12th. And then the next week, October 19th, was when the Jello Biafra episode came out. Jello Biafra, if you are familiar with his work, guy likes to talk, but he has some really great insights. I apologize to the person who listened to the episode and said that I'm a clown and enjoyed Jello and didn't like me, but I did my best, and God, I wish I didn't care about bad reviews. But I'm a thin-skinned, sorry person. The next week, on the 26th of October, I did Lamont Price's new podcast. We did a Halloween episode. It was me, him, and Tukey Kavanaugh, and that was nice to talk to Lamont and talk about Halloween and do all that sort of thing, because I missed that. And that week is when I think someone who is smarter than me and listens to the show can tell me, I think that our longest episode ever came out that week, episode 434 with Amanda Reyes, which I think is like a 3-hour episode. But Amanda is so smart and great, and a fellow lover of television and horror movies, and it was kind of a perfect episode for Halloween. And I'm sorry I didn't do a Halloween special this year. It was the first year I haven't done one, but I put up all the old ones on YouTube and did a few other things, so hopefully you went back and revisited those. But I think the episode with Amanda is a perfectly fine Halloween episode. And that Friday, the 30th, the day before Halloween, Devil's Night, I think some people call it. Some people call it Cabbage Night. I've never heard that in my life until recently. I don't know. What the hell is that? I don't know. Anyway, I did an event for, speaking of Denver Pop Culture Con and Pop Culture Classroom, they've been doing some live streaming events, and they did some Halloween week ones called Pop Scream. And I went through my favorite issue of TV Guide, which is the Halloween issue 1990. And we talked about 1990 horror TV, and it was a fun little hour-long chat. And that's up on YouTube if you want to see that. I can give you a link to that, or you can Google it. November 3rd, Election Day. It was a weird week. If you want to hear what I say about that, let me know. But the second I guessed it on Allison Rosen's show again and made some predictions that were mostly true after election day, but I could exhale a little bit after the end of December. But that was the week that Kettle Rudin was on, and I've known her for years. She was in the Pogue. She's an amazing musician. Every so often we'd meet up and grab a coffee, or she'd come to a show or something. And that was just so great to catch up with her. And that was one of the first episodes where it felt like, I hung out with an old friend, and I realized how much I missed that. But she's super funny, did her homework, really smart, fun episode. And then the Friday of that week was another bonus episode week where Meryl Marco did an episode. She has a great new graphic novel book out that's sort of a memoir / diary. I was supposed to do an episode with her years ago in LA, but she's very busy and timing didn't work out. So it was good to finally get her on the show. Super smart, just a legendary human being who's done some amazing stuff. November 9th that week, Gary Gulman's finally on the show. Gary's one of the first people I asked to do the show back in 2013, and he has blown up since then. Had a lot going on, but was nice enough to do the show with me, and that's a fun one. Dogs again, everybody, hold on. All right, they're done. It has been tough with the dogs, I will tell you that. Oh, but I've done my best, so thank you guys for putting up with hearing them in the background or, whatever else. Anyway, had Gary on the show, and that was really great. Again, a person I've known for years and haven't talked to in a long time, and it was great to sit down and talk to him at length. Also that week on the Friday, I did a Patreon-only episode with Allison Rosen, which was very intimate. But I really love Allison. She's just a fun person to talk to and a friend, and it was a nice sort of low-key conversation. So if you're a Patreon of hers, hey, listen to that. Then November 16th, finally, where this all started, take 2 of episode 438 with David Almeida came out. He of the Let's Face the Facts podcast, just an awesome dude. So thankful that he did the show again. We've recorded an episode twice, and hopefully I'll show up on his show again in 2021. The week of November 23rd, Thanksgiving week. That's the week that I had Nori Davis on. Again, Nori's someone that run in similar circles, have a lot of mutual friends. Did not ever meet him. Very funny guy. He's the first person I know that managed to put out a stand-up record recorded entirely in lockdown, and it's really, really great. So buy his album. Super impressive. But that was a fun chat as well. Episode 439 with Nori Davis. Then we had Thanksgiving, which was what it was that year. And then I had a Christmas special with Sean Sullivan, who, in addition to Two Boys in a Balcony, has also launched another podcast limited series that he did for all of December called The 25 Days of a Christmas Carol. He looked at 25 different versions of A Christmas Carol. I did 2 of them with him. I did the famous Teddy Z and the very first animated Christmas special, the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol. He came on this show, and for Christmas special, we did Bonnie Hunt's 2 Christmas episodes, which are more one's It's a Wonderful Life, which we had a whole argument over, how much Christmas Carol is It's a Wonderful Life and all that. The dogs disagree. They think it isn't, but they're mad. Anyway, I guessed it on a lot of podcasts this year in case you missed them. But I recorded how did I go? I got all John Landis there. I recorded maybe my favorite podcast I guessed it on that week, which was Selena Kopic's Candle podcast, 2 Wick Minimum. I love scented candles. Which I sort of talked about on the show before. But this is like an hour plus deep dive into my love of scented candles, and I think it's pretty damn entertaining. Also, was nice to catch up with Selena, as I hadn't talked to her in a while, and it was the first remote episode she did of her show, which she brought back. Really fun. Honestly, like, if you're gonna listen to one thing that's not this show in the year, listen to that. The dogs again. This is, I love them, but man. All right. their patience is wearing thin, but we're getting to December, the final month of the year, as you may or may not know. I do want to mention this was around the time that the Four Seasons Total Landscaping thing happened with those idiots, and is still the funniest thing probably that ever happened. I can't stop laughing about it, and it is nice to find some humor in the attempted coup of the United States by a bunch of old, worthless sacks of garbage. If you're unfamiliar, essentially in their twisted, bizarre, Trump really didn't win the really didn't lose the election, it was stolen from him thing. Rudy Giuliani, whose first wife was his own cousin, by the way, clearly said, hey, book the Four Seasons in Philadelphia. Some intern looked up Four Seasons and got Four Seasons Total Landscaping instead of the hotel. And also, I believe Trump tweeted out Total Landscaping when he was trying to tweet Total Landslide, which is what he claimed to have won by. And so next thing you know, they have a press conference at a landscaping company in Philadelphia next to a crematorium and a dildo store. And as soon as they start talking, that's when it officially was called for Biden. And also everyone there from the Trump side got COVID that day, including Corey Lewandowski, who can go fuck himself and is a lol piece of trash, who someday I'll punch in the face if I see him, once he's no longer contagious. Anyway, that happened that week. When that stuff went down, I danced. I felt happy for the first time in years, for like 48 hours at least, and then was back to my own miserable self when I realized that the world is really, really broken right now. But Four Seasons Total Landscaping, that was a real highlight of the year. So that first week in December, episode 440, my guest was Michael Cook, and he's a guy who I've guested on his podcast like 6 times or something. We usually end up doing something almost every Halloween, and so he guested on my podcast finally. Smart, funny guy, really like him. We talked about my favorite issue of TV Guide ever, that 1990 Halloween issue, and that was really fun. December 7th that week, I did my episode with Brett White. I did his show earlier in the year. He did my show then. That was also a really fun episode. December 14th was Sophia Alexandra. She is awesome. That was another fun episode 442. Then last week was Tony Paccitti, episode 443, great author, guy that I know from Mortified. This is episode 444, the year end in review. Whew, it's been a long one. And next week, I can tell you the next 2 weeks because I got them in the can. But the week of January 4th, my guest is Dara O'Brien, who is an amazing Irish comedian. You've seen him on things like Mock the Week. I love talking to him. This is a great episode. And again, I've been able to open up my guest list to people who I'm not in the same town with. And then the week of January 11th, my guest is Matt Bronger, who's again an old buddy who I haven't seen in a long time. It was nice to catch up with him. No plans to slow down. We'll be going into 2021. Hopefully, again, by this spring, summer, things will have turned around. Well, I mean, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel, guys. This has been a tough year. Again, I want to thank you so much for being here the whole time, for still listening to the show, for everyone who's reached out, told me how you're doing. It helps me. I like to hear you're doing okay, or I like to hear you're not doing okay, but you're trying, because not all of us are. I'm here to help you as much as I can, so let me know if there's anything I can do at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, or at social media, or however you want to get in touch with me. Thank you guys again for listening. It's again, this is, oh boy, 2021 will be better. I know it will, for everybody. If you've lost someone this year, my heart breaks for you. I'm so very sorry. If you have had COVID and are had to go through that and are dealing with any long-term health effects, I'm very sorry. But we'll get through it. And I'll see you guys again in person someday. But I will certainly see you again next week. So have a great new year. Celebrate safely indoors, however you want to do. And we'll do it. And next week I'll see you with a brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor with Dara O'Brien. So I'll see you again then. Thank you guys.